it's that time of year again. I think this year was a strong year for video games, but I think it didn't have one of those genre-defining games that most years have. 2017 had Breath of the Wild, 2018 had God of War and Red Dead Redemption 2, 2019 had The Outer Wilds and Sekiro, 2020 even had its hits with Hades and Ghost of Tsushima. 2021 doesn't have those standout games that define genres and get people talking, but they did have some really good games, so let's take the time to go over them. First, I gotta go over what qualifies for this list. Well, as I said in my honorable mentions video, the games in this list don't have to be from this year, but they do get extra points if they are. They also must be fully released, so no early access bullshit. With that out of the way, let's dive in. I wanna be Number 10 historically on my list is an artsy game. In 2017, the last year I did a Game of the Year video, yeah, it's been a while, I chose Doki Doki Literature Club. This year, I'm picking Before Your Eyes. Before Your Eyes was one of the few games this year to make me cry. I cried loud enough that my roommate heard me in the room over. It was a little embarrassing. There isn't too much to say about this one. I could talk about how the game system of blinking forces you to confront your fears and choose which scene you want to watch, because if you purposely sit and watch one scene while keeping your eyes open, you'll most likely prematurely blink on the next scene. I could also talk about how the game focuses on topics that other games wouldn't dare touch, but I won't, because this game, more than any other game on this list, is a game meant to be experienced. So go out, experience it. Cyberpunk is a game that I think history will look back on with a weird opinion. Its release was disastrous. CDPR really dropped the ball on every release. The console versions of the game are basically unplayable, and the PC version, while playable, is riddled with bugs. Funny story, while playing the game for footage for this video, I couldn't help but take footage of all the bugs I got, so that 90% of the footage you're seeing is bugs. Like this scene, where I walk into what's supposed to be a shootout, but no one is shooting. Then I shoot a gang member and the police pull a bounty on my head. These glitches are hilarious, but the game is still unfinished a full year after its disastrous launch. But if you look past the bugs, past the lack of polish, there's a game worth coming back to here. And I think that when the dust settles, people will love Cyberpunk. Its engaging world and nuanced approach to storytelling is fantastic, but I have to wonder, with how many side quests in Cyberpunk are Ubisoft-style filler, how many people will miss the good missions? How many people miss the opportunity to nail a man to a cross? How many people miss the chance to meet Brendan, the sentient vending machine? It's because of these side quests that I've never finished the main game. Well, that and a game-breaking bug that only recently got fixed. But the point is, Cyberpunk is good, but I don't think it should be rewarded for how much polish it is missing. But it also didn't steal your baby, take a massive dump on your porch, and then Fortnite dance over your dead corpse, like most of the internet seems to think. Persona 5 Royal. So I didn't play Persona 5 when it first came out. I have a delisted video on my channel about Persona 5's approach to storytelling, but I'd never played it back then. In 2020 then, during the lockdown, I picked up Persona 4 Golden on Steam. It's good, but I gotta save that for later. The point is, I finally got back into the swing of things with Persona 5 later that year. And oh boy, this sure is a game. Persona 5 Royal is essentially an expansion of Persona 5. It adds a few new scenes and a whole new chapter at the end of the base game. But you play Persona for the story. And while I don't think the story is as strong as Persona 4's Murder Mystery, it's still a good one. The themes of rebellion and justice are good, and I love the game's sense of style and flash. The characters outside of Haru are well fleshed out, even if they are a little on the creepy side. But you don't play Persona for the story, you played for the dungeon-delving madness. And this is Persona 5 Royal's ultimate one-up on Persona 4. The combat is much better in this game, especially with the expansion of the baton pass mechanic in Royal. There's a certain flow. On top of that, the dungeons are no longer random in design, and are more akin to something you would want to play. But that doesn't change the fact that Mementos is still a pile of shit, and is still random, and literally has all the same problems as Persona 4's dungeons. You changed the game so that you didn't have to deal with random floor layouts just to add them back in, one of the worst decisions I have ever seen in a video game. Persona 5's dungeon delving gameplay is vastly improved from that of Persona 4, but that's what makes it the baffling decision to re-implement the thing that they removed for good reasons. Switching gears, the added portion at the end of this game is stunning and fantastic, and I can't wait to see Atlus ruin it by milking Persona 5 to death. Maybe we can get a cool fighting game out of it though, or a couple lame dancing games.
Now I face up, I hold up, I reach out to the truth on the rising sea.
Persona 4 Golden is a weird game. Its gameplay is outdated and the graphics look like it was released in the PS Vita. But you don't play Persona for the gameplay, you play it for the story. And this story is stronger than Persona 5's, and that's saying something. Add a more cohesive plot and believable characters and it's really a beauty to behold. With half the runtime of Persona 5, a lighter tone, and more relatable plots than, "My friend is in a coma and my modeling career sucks," Persona 4 set the bar for Persona 5 to beat, and Persona 5 hits its nuts on the bar. That's not to disparage Persona 5's achievement, but 4 definitely has the leg up on it. I will have more to say on these in a future video, but let's just say for now that Persona 4's small-time vibe and themes are stronger than 5. Although if you play 5 and are looking to play 4, it might be a little rough as the combat has not aged well and neither have the dungeons, but it's definitely a story worth playing. The characters are more fleshed out and believable. The world doesn't get as hostile, and the stories it attempts to tell are a little less inhuman. I should probably give an example. Okay, so to do an example of how Persona 4's confidants are better than 5's, we should look at a comparable character and see how each of their stories stack up. The Tower Confidant is one that I kind of pseudo-randomly chose, and it's the first one that comes to mind for me. It's not my favorite confidant in either game, and the characters are similar enough for a good comparison to be made. So in Persona 5, the Tower Confidant is Shinya Oda. He's a kid who is the king at a game called Gunabout. You originally seek him out to help with the mission in Mementos because there's a cheater whom you can't seem to hit with your attacks. He agrees to trade you in Gunabout as long as you keep giving him proof about the Phantom Thieves. His story revolves around his mother and her constant pressure that she puts on his school, making Shinya an outcast. He's consistently showing that he is a troublemaker, and his mother kind of hates him. He's a shark in the game he plays, purposely preying on those worse than him for money. However, the Confidant doesn't call him out on this. In fact, the dialogue choices reward you for reinforcing this behavior. He isn't wrong in his behavior. It's obviously just his mother's pressure on him. He doesn't need to have his heart stolen. Obviously, his mother's does, though. So you go to steal her heart in a Mementos mission, and everything wraps itself up for Shinya Oda's storyline. The one where the best dialogue choices are the ones that actively encourage a child to make bad choices. So what about Persona 4's Tower Confidant? Well, I'm gonna butcher this name. Shu Nakajima is a smart, stuck-up student who you are hired to tutor in 4. You learn he is under constant pressure to continue to be the number 1 in his class by his mother. When another student who is athletic and smart joins his class, the new student is bullied because he cannot pass Shu's performance. Shu then cheats on a test, gets caught, and then has to almost spend his birthday alone. You help him with this in the Confidant. His mother then realizes what she did and apologizes for the things she often said to him. Shu then realizes that he doesn't have to be the best anymore because he already has a black mark on his record. He then goes and makes friends with the new transfer student. Persona 4's Confidant is more down to earth. It doesn't involve video game masters and going into collective subconsciouses to change a mother's mind. It just involves you attempting to do your best to give counsel to a child who goes through problems that normal kids might go through. Persona 4 tends to deal with being true to oneself, and I think that's a little more relatable than rebellion and the themes that Persona 5 puts forward. Shu's Confidant is more compelling because it is written to where I can see it happening in the real world. I can see it being a real story, and that's where it excels over Persona 5's story. Also, in Persona 4's Tower Confidant, you don't actively gain points by reinforcing bad behavior in a child. That's just not cool. Back in 2017, I said this. Hollow Knight. Well, looking over my list, I realized how many indie games there are. And this one's great too. Great gameplay, great aesthetics, and great story. Look into this one if you like Metroidvania-style gameplay. And boy, I really undersold this game. Hollow Knight is a different type of game. Originally when I played it, I did so because I thought the gameplay looked cool and the animation was different from most games. I got to the grim fight, banged my head against a wall for around 5 days, and then set the game down. That was 2018. And now, well, I have almost bested Hollow Knight. But for Hollow Knight, it's really not the destination that matters. It's the journey you took to get there that does. This game has its fair share of problems. The White Palace is a nightmare of game design. The boss rush locks certain content behind it so only those willing to dedicate their life to the game can see it. And finally, the game has abrupt difficulty spikes that really don't make sense. But I'm willing to look past all those issues, not because the game atones for the sins it commits, but instead because the game is just fun. The world is interesting, fleshed out, and leaves you wanting to explore more, and every moment is beautiful. The calm moments sitting on benches, the intense fights where you scrape by with one mask left, the tense platforming. All these things together create a game that really just works. And where Hollow Knight really shines is in its bosses. Everyone has their favorite boss. My roommate, Evan, likes the Soulmaster. My friend Jackson likes the Mantis Lords. Me? I'm a fan of the Collector. This weird guy hopping around the arena throwing jars at you. It's just this weird and interesting fight. My favorite part about it is when you die to him, he puts your soul in a jar. But the fact that everyone has a different favorite really shows you the quality of these bosses. If even one boss was too poorly designed, the game would crumble under its own weight. But there isn't an instance where that's the case. Even the worst bosses still have merit, except Flukmarm. All my homies hate Flukmarm. And now on to the best worst part of my tier list. The roguelike section. One of my favorite genres is roguelikes due to their pick up and play nature along with their infinite replayability. Most of my top games on Steam are roguelikes, and the next one ranks in at number 3 on my list of most played games on Steam. Gunfire is one of those games where I can't express enough why I love it. I picked it up back when it first came out in early access back in 2020. I've been slowly watching its development throughout the next year and a half. It's kind of beautiful to watch it in action. The graphics aren't exactly appealing, but what it lacks in graphics it makes up for in high-octane gameplay. I love this shit. The fast-paced shooters that make you move. The enemies come to you. If you stand still for too long, you're dead. This is like if you took Borderlands and Doom and smashed them together and said, actually, it's also a roguelike. There are 5 playable characters, each one with a different playstyle. You can be a sniping tiger or a shotgun bird, but no matter what you pick, there's a difficulty and a character that suits your speed. They say variety is the spice of life, and Gunfire definitely proves that. The insane variety of guns in this game is what keeps you coming back. Let's say you play the dog for his dual wield ability. Well, one match, I can run double big hippos, which are the large Gatling guns. Another, I can run double laser gloves. If I hate my mouse and really want to destroy it in a run, I can run double knives. Or I can kind of do anything in between. That's the beauty of Gunfire's diversity. Every run feels different because of it. I definitely suggest picking this one up with a couple buddies and playing through it together. That way you can all experience the beauty of slowly but surely climbing your way through the ranks, unlocking things and leveling your skill tree. All the way up until BAM! You finally beat that first boss for the first time. And then you see it. The portal to the new area, and you go, and then you probably lose somewhere in the second world, but then you take your soul essence, you put it back into the skill tree, and you keep running, and you keep getting farther until suddenly, boom, you've done it. You've beaten the final boss. There is really no excuse for not picking this game up at the $20 price point. And the great thing about this game too is you can go onto the subreddit and post issues with the game, and there's a good likelihood that the devs respond to your message. They're active within the community, and you can really see the passion they put within this game. This is like one of the gold standards for indie games. Between this, Dead Cells, and other games on this list, the roguelike scene is flourishing on the indie scene, and there's a reason that AAA developers haven't even tried to step into this space. Because indie devs do it best. Risk of Rain 2 is like jazz. Often you're thrown into an assortment of items for a character that they don't really belong on, and you're told to just kind of make it work. It's not easy, but every chest opening is like a new instrument or new rhythm for your character. In other games, there are dominant strategies that permeate throughout the entire game. Some builds are just kinda better than others. Risk of Rain 2 shuns that idea by saying, all my characters are unique and each is different. Every build is somewhat viable. Some items are better than others, but you'll never turn down a red item if you can get it, except for Head 5T. Head 5T is awful, but you know what? It might be useful for scrap. But with Risk of Rain 2, you learn to improvise. You learn to efficiently farm levels before the music tells you that maybe you should hit the teleporter. You learn what items are good and which ones aren't really good, but you still take the bad ones because why not? You learn each level and their secrets. You slowly learn how to accurately gauge your power level. Can you do void cells with 3 tougher times a soldier syringe and a backup magazine on loader? Maybe. I don't know. Risk of Rain's biggest progression is not the upgrades you get for the characters, but the knowledge that you get with the game. Just like jazz, the more you know about how to improvise and use your instrument, the better you can be. One of the best things about Risk of Rain 2 is that you don't go looking for monsters to kill. They come to you, which means there's rarely a dull moment. You're always on your toes, even when you're sitting there as captain waiting for a chest to open, or farming enemies, or looking for the portal. Every second, there is always danger to you. And at the heart of Risk of Rain 2 is that desire to hit the god run, or just scrape by fast enough with enough items to make it to the final boss and maybe beat him. What makes Risk of Rain 2 the most played game on my Steam account is the vast modding library that comes with it. You want to play as Snoop Dogg? Go for it. You want to play as John Borpa? Yeah, that's fine. Dragon Ball or League of Legends characters? Yeah, you can find a mod for it. And it's all fun as hell. There's rarely a dull moment in Risk of Rain 2. It's really the pinnacle of polished and well-tested indie games. This game shows why the indie scene absolutely destroys the roguelike space. No one can even get close to it. Gunfire is good, but Risk of Rain 2 is better. I look forward to the expansion that'll be out later this year, and please don't mess it up. But if the anniversary update is anything to say about Hoppo Games' approach to DLC and expansions, I know they won't. Around 8 months ago, I picked up It Takes Two, played through the game, and then I put it down. And then I came back, and I did it again and again and again. Because this game is something special. I think the Game of the Year title doesn't really deserve to go to this game, because out of all the top 3 games here, this is the one game where the story and the writing is the weakest. The gameplay is extremely strong, but you'd think from the guys who made A Way Out, the writing would be a little bit better. It's almost so bad it's laughable. Like, character development is pretty awful, but knowing all of this, knowing the criticism I can levy at this game, the game is still number 3 for me. And that's saying something. I think that speaks very largely. And that's because the gameplay is so fucking smooth. The story doesn't matter. All that really matters in this game is the variety of gameplay systems and levels you'll be moving through. The game is like an amusement park in the amount of gameplay systems it has. In one level, you'll be gunning down wasps, and in another, you'll be jumping around with fidget spinners. That's just how varied the game is. One problem I have with the game is that it almost bills itself as a game for children. Like, it looks like a Pixar movie, but I really don't think it is. I think like the core demographic for this game is probably more teens and adults who can get behind more of the complex themes that it's attempting to put forward. Like, there's some really fucked up shit in this game. Like, destroying your child's favorite toy so you can bathe in her tears. Like, not only destroy it, they slowly dismember it and then throw it off of a cabinet. It's a little fucked up. May and Cody, the protagonists, are assholes, and the game really doesn't comment on it. And while this is a problem with the game, I think that devs should really pat themselves on the back for making this game this creative and inventive with the gameplay systems it puts forth. Maybe next time try to make a game that doesn't make me root for the talking asshole book, though. There really aren't any words that I can use to describe Inscryption, and there really is no way to do the game justice without having you just play it yourself. I think Inscryption's biggest weakness is that you can only experience it once, but unlike something like Doki Doki Literature Club, or even Milk Game, the gameplay isn't just a farce. The great thing about Inscryption is that along the way, the game is fun, and I think that's what a lot of people miss with games like this. You need to keep the gameplay engaging for the story to really engulf yourself. It needs to give me a reason to come back other than just my own curiosity. Video games are inherently an interactive media, and when you have games like Doki Doki, which you can basically make a book out of, it really kinda loses the vibes. Could it have been a book? Well, I mean, the answer for Doki Doki is really no, but me even asking the question is maybe a problem with that. Inscryption says, yeah, fuck that, and hits it out of the park with a fun game. I loved finding all these secrets and hidden pieces that Inscryption leaves us with, and I didn't come back to the game because I wanted to see more of the story. I came back because I wanted another crack at Leshy's roguelike, which isn't necessary because the game doesn't give you much of a story for a lot of the game. But when it hits, and the gameplay slaps so hard that I would definitely play this TCG in real life if it existed. But you bet that when they came out with a roguelike beta update, I was like, oh, I'm hitting this. Honestly, I've already said a little bit too much. Grab a cold beverage, sit down with the lights off, and play Inscryption. Out of all the games on this list, this is the one that I think maybe everyone should experience. It isn't bogged down by weird systems or questionable writing, it just is as it is. And as it is beautiful and terrifying. I have a lot to say about this game. A page and a half to say, actually. So we should probably just jump into it. There's a lot that can be said about Psychonauts 2, and most of it should be said. It's kind of weird though, as I don't feel like I should be the one to say it, but I'll really try my best with it. Psychonauts 2 is a masterpiece. I've never played the first game, but I've always heard it was good. I guess its age really threw me off. The thing with old games is they tend to have these idiosyncrasies that are kind of a product of the time. And Psychonauts 1 has content gating until certain collectible conditions are met, funky controls, and a lot of whole other messiness. But the thing that stands out in my mind from Psychonauts 1 was the level design. Every time I'd look at the game, I'd see something really cool, and that always made me kind of want to play it in the back of my mind. So for a sequel, all they needed to do was kind of match level design standards, and get rid of all the fat that kind of surround it. And you know what? They didn't just do that. They didn't settle for just okay, because as far as level design goes in this game, they absolutely crushed it. Psychonauts 2 just needed to leap over the bar set by Psychonauts 1 and people would be happy. But instead, Psychonauts 2 not only leapt over the bar, but they took it and left with it. It's gone. It's down the street already. First, we gotta start with the art style. The original game's art style was a little funky, but I saw it as a product of the time. 2005 was a different era. Animation as a whole was going through a weird phase, and the animation style was perfectly suited to the weird abstract spaces that populate the game. It comes at a time where shows like Invader Zim and Courage the Cowardly Dog were really taking over the animation space. Psychonauts 2 takes that style and expands it, making a visual wonderland in these sublime spaces. Speaking of the spaces themselves, let's talk level design. These levels are absolutely insane. I can see the meeting now. We need a bowling level. Okay, but let's make it a German-fested level because the level takes place in a bowling shoe. Alright, good work people, let's go put that into production. Like who thinks of this? The level design is just so insane. They don't just make a level that would pass for a 3D platformer. Like in most 3D platformers, they're just like, oh, slap a lava world, slap an ice world, slap a grassy plains world. Psychonauts 2 says, nah, fuck that. We have hair world. We have library world. We have booze island world. We have hospital casino world. I also love how the game approaches mental health. Psychonauts 2 kind of flips the script. Instead of having Raz solve people's problems, they solve the problems themselves. Raz just kind of is a catalyst to help them realize the problems so they can solve it. Raz doesn't invade people's minds without permissions, and the ramifications of messing around in people's minds is clearly shown from the first arc of the game. I love how the characters are unique and they all have fun powers. I love how Raz controls, and I love how Psychonauts 2 doesn't focus on Raz. The story really focuses on Ford and his fellow members of the Psychic Six. All these people have their baggage and regrets, and it all plays out beautifully. They're old, and while you don't always get their full life story, there's a lot of subtle characterizations that many games are just missing now. Last of Us 2, really, please, sit down with a pen and paper and just take notes about characterization from Psychonauts 2. They're absolutely doing a masterclass on it. And on top of it, there's like a solid LGBT relation thrown in, so it's really naturally brought up and portrayed that you probably didn't even think anything about it. It was so well integrated that I didn't think about it until I was pretty much writing this script and processing the game afterwards. This is how you do representation in gaming. All of this comes in a package that I think a lot of people missed. The big thing with Psychonauts 2 is that it's on Game Pass, and it really shouldn't be overlooked. I honestly think that it not winning a single award at the Game Awards is a crime. The world is so fun to explore, and the story is told in such a fun way. The game makes statements about our world, but doesn't do so in an over-the-top way. So many games today just kind of bash over the head with a stupid message that it ultimately fails to deliver on. Psychonauts 2 says, we have commentary on the world around us, and we have deep characterization, but we're not going to tell you outright. The way Psychonauts does this is through its levels. I'm going to spoil a little bit of one of the stages to get my point across. So, in Bob's Zanotto stage, the world is a single desert island, and there's a bunch of oceans, and there are other people sitting on islands. Bob's major psychic power is that he's able to control and talk to plants. So, the desert being on his island is kind of interesting, and strikes you immediately as kind of strange. And as you kind of sail around this small planet that is his mind, you can go find his niece, Lily, who is Raz's girlfriend in this game, and you can go talk to her. And immediately one of the things that strikes you is her voice is different. And you're like, what are you doing out here?
Just trying to stay away from Great Uncle Bad News.
Whoa, what? And then she'll say some really heinous shit. But the point is that's not her. That's just how Bob sees her. He's never actually talked to her, so he doesn't know what she sounds like. He just assumes that she thinks he's old and weird. And it's subtle characterization like that that really brings this entire game together. And all of this was told not through cutscenes, but through gameplay. And that's what puts this above something like It Takes Two in my mind. It Takes Two has better gameplay, but but Psychonauts tells a story that I think everybody can at least take something from. Whether it's tackling loss, depression, anxiety, or even personal identity, this game really does it all, and I honestly think I haven't played a game this well written in a long time. It doesn't waste your time, and it really is worth the Game of the Year spot I'm giving it. Well done, Double Fine. You guys deserve it. Psychonauts 2 is really a masterpiece. So that's all for this. What's your Game of the Year? Tell me down in the comments with this amazing call to action. If you liked the video, you could maybe leave a like or something. I don't really care. I have a video on musical albums and a small indie game. Those are 2 separate videos, but they're in the pipeline, and if you don't want to miss those, the best way to not miss them is by hitting the subscribe button. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see y'all next time.